Hi, everyone. Thank you all so much for joining us this afternoon for a very special discussion with actor-producer Kevin Bacon. He's here to talk about his new Blumhouse Universal Pictures thriller, You Should Have Left, which debuted online on June 18th. And I'll put a link into the chat later so that you can look it up. The film, of course, stars Kevin along with Amanda Seyfried and Avery Essex. It was produced by Jason Blum, Kevin Bacon, and Dean O'Toole. Written for the screen and directed by David Koepp, based on the novel by Daniel Kellman. And it's my pleasure to welcome Kevin to talk to USC. Thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
You've worked with David before on Stir of Echoes, and I'm curious to know a little bit about the decision to work together 20 years later on another horror film.
Well, as soon as I finished Stir of Echoes, I didn't know David before we started working together, but I really enjoyed the experience, and I really liked the movie that we made together, and I started kind of pounding the table with him on trying to do something again, and it only took 20 years of me hassling to finally wear him down, and I like the genre, as you know, I've worked across a whole bunch of different genres, and I'm drawn, more to these kinds of psychological horror films. But basically, they're great, acting exercises, and they also are characters who are in life and death situations. And so I was talking to my wife about a sort of template for a scary movie, and she was like, how about a marriage, which is gave me a little bit of pause, because that was the first thing that popped into her head. And David and I for 20 years have been getting together, spending time or having lunch or going to the movies and talking about ideas that we could work on again together. But when I suggested that one, it really kind of sparked. I could see the wheels starting to turn, in his head. And once those wheels were turning, it was a shockingly short journey to a house in Wales.
How did you come across the book?
Well, what happened was we were very far along. He was, and when I say we, he has the ideas, and I shake my head and go, yeah, that's a good idea, that's a good idea, that's a good idea. But he was really at an outline point, which some writers do and some writers don't, but he was pretty much breaking down the whole story. And I picked up the New York Times, and there was a review for a book, a German translation, American translation by a German author. And it sounded kind of interesting, and it was only 100 pages. And, I'm a terrible reader. Like, you show me a book that has 700 pages, and I'm like, I can't do it. So I was like, oh, I'll do this. And I read it. And as sometimes happens in the world of, content, it was in the zeitgeist. It was a very, not exactly, but a similar kind of story to what we were already, working on. And so I said, let's approach the writer, and together we went and got the rights to the book. And I love the title, if nothing else. And the movie and the script have morphed and changed a lot from the book. But Daniel, the author, has been very, very supportive of the film, and he's a great guy and an excellent writer. And if you want a fun, 100-page kind of, scary book, it's killer.
I'm curious, since your wife had such a role in sparking this topic, if she stayed actively invested in the actual story that you guys decided to tell.
No, it was really just that one line. No, it was really just that one line. I mean, as is the case with a lot of stuff that my wife and I work on, we have, whether it's on paper or not, we have a kind of partnership. So if she's, shooting something or, directing something, we'll share scripts and ideas. And it's a very, we don't we don't just go off and not communicate about our work together. That's what we talk about at dinner. So, she was certainly aware, and she came and visited for a while. I think not very long, but she came once when we were shooting, and was on the set, and of course knows David. So, but no, it was really that seed of the idea.
So this is a project that you guys originated and then took to Blumhouse?
Yeah, we he wrote it on spec, and so it was the idea. It was knocking around things, getting to the point of the outline, then finding the book. This is the kind of timeline, and then he wrote the script relatively quickly, and we went out, with a kind of classic weekend read situation. And Jason said, "Don't make this movie with anybody else. We want it." So that was it.
It does feel like the Blumhouse model for telling horror stories seems very much appropriate for this film. Given the concentration on just a handful of characters, mostly one location, with a few other things here and there. And I'm curious if the project was developed further once you had Jason on board.
They had some suggestions for sure, but they were fairly hands off. I think that they got a little bit more, we got a little bit more deeply into it when it got to, cuts and editing and testing and stuff like that. I mean, Jason's sort of model is, as you said, do it contained, keep the overall cost of the film down, and believe in the filmmakers. He's very filmmaker oriented. He wants to nurture those directors that have a vision to go out and do their thing. That's very much their MO. It's a very different thing than a normal studio system where you get behind directors sometimes, but a lot of times you get behind stars or brands, intellectual property. You know what I mean? It's a very different concept. I think that it's interesting because it's thought of as a horror movie, and horror movies traditionally have sort of always been on the fringe of the kind of B-movie type stuff. So to have a company that is very, very filmmaker based and doing scary content. By the way, that's not all they do. Whiplash being a great example was a pretty unusual concept, I think, and one that's clearly been working for him.
How did you go about finding Avery? I know this is her first film, right? So that must have been an exciting adventure for you guys.
Well, listen, I think it was some incredible number of little girls came in, 1,000. I'm not even sure. Just a lot of kids, and by the time it got to myself and David, it was very beautifully kind of whittled down. And casting children is difficult because there's being an actor, and then there's being sort of like a talking model. And a lot of times kids come through the commercial world because that's the first place you're going to really need a child to, and so they're approaching it from a very external kind of way, kind of like a beef smile when you say that, and can your voice go up at the end, so to get them to actually be emotional or engaged in the scene can be a really tricky thing. Avery, was so fascinating because she's a very, very energetic little girl, and her mind is going a million miles an hour. And I've cast children in films before, and what you have to be really careful about is not to cast them, if you can possibly do this. You can't cast them based on what happens on either side of action and cut. You have to just think about what's going on once the camera is rolling, and what are those eyes able to do, and is there a kind of focus? And she was a perfect example of that. You know, my MO when it comes to children is no movie is worth putting a child in a situation where they feel uncomfortable or afraid. It's just not worth it. I don't care. I'm not going to have a place where anybody's going to feel scared. And when you're doing a scary movie, some of the things that I'm doing right in front of her are very scary. Yeah. So I felt like I really had to, sit down and talk to her and talk to her mom, who was great too, and say, listen, I'm going to be doing some stuff. I'm making some faces. I'll be yelling. I'll be, jumping around. I'm a professional pretender, and so are you. And we're going to get together, and we're colleagues, and we're just going to kind of pretend together. But she had such a hunger for acting and for understanding acting. I'll never forget, there's a scene that where I'm talking to her, and we're under a pretty stressful situation, and I hadn't really necessarily thought of the scene as I knew it was an emotional scene, but I didn't know it was going to be a scene that was going to make me want to cry in the scene, and neither did she, and so I hadn't said anything to her about that. And then in the middle of the scene, we're shooting it, and I got really emotional, and I was crying, and I looked at her little face, and she's looking up at me like this during the scene, like, what the hell is going on? And at the end of the scene, David said, cut. She said, how did you do that? How did you do that? You have to tell me how you did that. How did you do that? And so I realized that she really was looking at this from an actor's perspective rather than just getting lucky with a child saying a line in a certain way.
Wow. Was there something that really caught your eye during her audition?
There's, I don't even like to say this because in a lot of ways I don't really believe it, but sometimes there's a magic that is the camera just sees, Mm-hmm. And I think it has to do with the ability that, and this could be natural or it could be nurtured or it could be learned, but it has to do with how you can take whatever's going inside and have it come out through your eyes. And what's really interesting about film to me is that the camera sees things in a much more specific way than we even see. So you can sit in a room with somebody and you can see a performance and watch that performance. But as you're watching that performance in that room, you're also peripherally listening and hearing a whole bunch of other stuff that's going on. There's this whole other world, and there's your thoughts, and there's all these things that are kind of happening in your world. And sometimes you miss things. I've done this a million times in the directing and casting process. And then you go back and you look at the tape and you go, look at that moment. Look at that. Look at those eyes. Look at look at that thing that she did in between the lines, and Avery just, she had that stuff. And we were so lucky to have Amanda because, as much as, want to connect with somebody that's playing my child, and I obviously have a deep feeling for, I'm also, first off, old, second off, busy, because I'm trying to produce the movie too. So Amanda was a great help because she was really willing to, hang out with Avery and play games with her. And Amanda's daughter was on the set as well. So it was good.
Yeah, you can really see the connection between the two of them in that beautiful scene where they're outside in the woods and the daughter keeps asking, about why her father is hated. I mean, that for me was a really wonderful performance from both of them. Do you have a sense of, did they have a chance to rehearse as well? I mean, how does a production like this have any space for anything besides days of shooting?
We didn't have rehearsal in the sense of let's get together and run lines. I don't think so much. Um, rehearsal in films in general, it is a lot of directors approach it a lot of different ways, and it can be a little bit of elusive. I mean, I've done everything from A Few Good Men, for instance. It was like we rehearsed it like a play. We had the set taped off, and we had props, and the whole thing. And to rehearsal, for something like Mystic River or Diner was just us just hanging out in the bar. That was the basic, you know, the kind of like what we needed to do. And so in this case, you know, uh, Avery would run lines, I think, probably with her mom, and then sometimes on the set with Amanda. And the lines were, it's a difficult thing for a kid, 6 years old, to learn a page of dialogue, and especially someone that had never really done it before. But she oftentimes got it. I mean, it, you know, uh, it was a little bit of an adjustment when you figured out that you had to do things more than once. I don't think that she'd really thought about take two or a tight shot or a master or coverage or turning around on somebody else. So that was a challenge. And I have to say also for Amanda and for me too, um, we had a photo double for Avery. I mean, this may be too smoke and mirrors, but so when you cover something, if she's not actually in the shot, because of union and child labor laws and stuff, you want to get the kid off the set as soon as you can, because you have to bank hours that they can possibly come back in. So we had these great little girls, young girls too, 7, 6, 7, 8 years old, who were Avery side and had size and had the hair and stuff, and they would stand in, and when you'd play the scene with them, it's an actor's challenge, and there's a lot of challenges to being an actor, but it is a challenge sometimes to be able to transfer in your mind that energy and that feeling that you have to another stand-in. But like I said, it's professional pretending.
You have a lot of scenes here where you have to go to some extreme places, but you're not necessarily in a scene with another actor. When you don't have the energy of the other performer in the room, how do you build up to that performance? Or is there anything different about prepping for a scene where you have to express terror or anger or something, but you don't have someone that you're expressing it to?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that there is, you certainly are reliant on the director, and in a scary movie, in a scary movie like this, where things are very disjointed, and where we shot part of it in Wales and part of it in London, and things were shot out of order and all that, you need to have a guide that's going to tell you in the course of the film where you are at. Like I used to say, all right, Dave, okay, which hall have I gone down, and what have I seen so far? And I'll read back in the script, but if you're doing a lot of scenes in the course of the day, sometimes you really need some help with that. You need help with from the camera person, and also from your training, to be able to work and know where that camera is and make it work, so that whatever it is that you're feeling will come across. When I was a very, very young actor, one of my first times in acting school, we used to talk about this exercise. It was an exercise that came from the Strasbourg, sort of Stanislavski method side of things. And it was called the private moment. And what we used to do in front of the class is bring in props, and if there were costumes or whatever, and we would set up a place where we were used to being alone. So in other words, in this case, we were all young acting students. It would be our shitty apartments in New York. And then we just got up there and had to live in front of the class for sometimes up to 45 minutes. And you used to watch these things and go, this is the most boring thing. I don't really understand it. But the genesis of it really has become very powerful for me. And that is that you're going to be asked to have a private moment. And the exercise in the class was to get to something that you would stop if somebody else walked in the room. So in other words, I mean, the kind of classic example would be the guy who's, holding a brush in his hand and singing, Three Dog Night into the mirror. So, that while I didn't really understand the exercise at the time, other than it was just kind of funny and, whatever, it really was a very profound thing. And not only that, I often ask or sort of lobby for private moments for a character, because I think you can learn a lot about a character, because life is a performance to a certain extent, right? Because I'm performing right now, and if I go into the grocery store, I mean, maybe not for everybody, but for me, I feel like I'm always kind of like a little bit performing. But if I'm truly alone, I'm not. And so who is that person, and what can you learn about a person in the course of a film? That's like I always say, can we go home with the guy? It's like a way to see that. So when you look at something like You Should Have Left, while those are very, they're challenging because they're all kind of scary moments. So you're very emotionally dialed up. There's also that moment where I come in and I'm trying every single light in the house and I'm alone. And it tells you something about who this guy is based on how he's reacting to that. It's not a heavy thing, but it's still an insight into the character.
Tell us about having to wear that other hat of being one of the producers, especially when you're in production. What specific things are you working on as a producer while you're also starring in the movie?
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's all kinds of producers, as I'm sure you've heard, and some producers just end up with my dog is snoring a lot. Sorry, probably hear that. Some producers end up with a lot of they come up with money, so they get the producing credit, or some producers, it's a vanity thing. There's a lot of different levels of it. And in this case, it was like a super, super hands-on kind of producing thing. Now, that being said, at a certain point, I feel like you have to step away and be able to delegate some other, some other jobs to other people. I have to know exactly what's going on all the time with the budget, but I don't have to know, in the course of my day, if somebody comes, if there's some, deal to be made, I just don't have time to do it. So, Dean O'Toole, who was worked with us in the UK, was a fantastic nuts and bolts producer, somebody that, really is making the deals and is checking the weather and, doing all those other things that, content wise, I don't have the time to think about. That being said, when you're not the producer, you don't have to worry if it's going over. You can just sit back and say, hey, I'm just actor boy. It's not my problem.
I'm curious because we were talking a little bit earlier before we started the webinar about what's going on right now with actors not working because of the pandemic, and I'm reminded of the fact that this film seems so perfectly timed to be watched in a pandemic. Not that, I mean, obviously you didn't shoot this with the pandemic in mind, but the claustrophobia of it, is so, it hits you a little bit harder than it may if you weren't stuck at home. And I'm curious to know how that might have played into the release of the movie, if you were intending for this to go into theaters, if you decided from the beginning it was going to be a VOD release. What were the parameters there?
Well, when the pandemic hit, we had decided that the best place for it was on demand. but it was really a question of what got adjusted was not so much theaters versus PVOD, was timing. And so we had some discussions with Universal and with Blumhouse, and everybody felt like the timing was good to have a new piece of content that had to do with the house. It's interesting, houses, we're learning a lot about our houses, right? And there's probably some people that are stuck in houses that didn't actually choose to be in them. So, they come into play a lot in this one.
Do you see the film any differently, given all that you've been through the past 3 to 4 months?
Well, yeah. I mean, I think I think I think it holds up, pandemic or no. I'm proud of the film. I think that David did a fantastic job. I think that it's interesting. I dream sometimes in structure in houses, and they're different. They have different styles, and some are old and creaky, and some are modern, and they have different floors. And I've talked to dream analysts in the past who've said that this is actually your manifestation of yourself, of your own psyche or your soul, and the different floors, a different part of your life or your history or whatever. And I've also spent a lot of time, I realize, especially now, in rented houses, because when I first started out as a kid, and I went on the road to act, Animal House was my first movie, and I stayed in the hotel, and I was like, this is the coolest thing, I'm in a hotel. If you go and live for 3-4 months in a hotel, like, that loses its appeal for me. I like to cook. I like to be able to do my own laundry. I like to be able to live in a place, as opposed to just kind of live as a tourist in a place. It helps. Sometimes it really can inform your acting. I mean, because you're having to go down to the Piggly Wiggly or whatever and experience it. So as a result, between the two of us, we've been married for 31 years. We're both actors. We lived in countless houses, and so there's things in the movie that I really can relate to. Pictures missing on the walls and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, how did you find that house? It's not what I would normally expect from the Welsh countryside.
Right. Well, it was a challenge because David had envisioned the house as not being Gothic and ivy covered and filled with creaky antiques, just because it's kind of a trope at this point for a scary movie. And he also wanted it to be in Wales. And as far as I know, he'd never been to Wales. I mean, he was living in London and had been there for a couple of years. And I'm trying to think if he'd actually been to Wales, maybe, but I don't know. But that's where he wrote it. So to find a minimalist house, rentable or usable house in a spot in Wales where it would not be surrounded by other houses, was certainly a challenge. And literally within a couple of days of hiring a production designer, she shared with us this photo, and we looked at the house and we went, oh my God. It was almost depressing, because I thought to myself, we're not going to be able to get it. Like, because, locations, you never know. You don't, especially in a movie like this, low budget movie, who knows what they're going to want to do or not do, or, but we got it. And it's an interesting house because you can rent it. It is a, for lack of a better term, an Airbnb. And people, they go to rent it because it's a place of meditation. Like, there's no televisions, and it's very, very stark, and you're supposed to just kind of go there and kind of stare at your navel. It's supposed to be like a quiet, contemplation place, and it has that sort of vibe. So yeah, you can rent it.
How much of the actual interior of the house did you use?
We used a lot. It was brilliant though, because Sophie, our production designer, we shot Wales, exteriors and many, many interiors. And then went down to London and walked on to this recreation of the house, only because we needed to be able to move walls and expand things, and we actually added a second floor, and and doors had to open into places that didn't exist, and there had to be stairways that you didn't know were coming, and all that kind of stuff. So it was quite an accomplishment, and very, very hard from an acting standpoint, but definitely from a directing standpoint, just to keep everything in line and say, okay, well, this is a piece that's going to go in this piece of the puzzle, and we shot this piece. So it was a challenge.
For everyone that's out there watching, feel free to put your questions in the Q&A box, and I'll open it up to you guys in a moment. I wanted to ask just a little bit about, because we've been hosting conversations about the future in you know, all of its unpredictable forms, and I'm curious to know, as an actor, how you're looking at future projects in terms of, I mean, obviously you can be spending time working on scripts and like developing roles that you want to play with writers and whatnot, but there's two things I wanted to ask about. One was how far into something like a virtual production are you looking into? And also, because actors are really kind of on the front lines on a movie set in terms of not being able to be as safe as everyone else, what do you see as being the conditions that will work for you?
I have read the recommended protocols, and they seem good, solid. I mean, to me, the biggest question from what I've read is the tests, because a lot of what I've read is really reliant on some in testing and testing and testing, and I don't hear. I don't know, what I hear is that you can't get them. So that seems like a bit of a stumbling block at this point. But I'm encouraged that we'll be able to figure that piece of it out. I don't know. Maybe I'm silly, but I'm not I'm not afraid for myself. And I love to I love to work. I also feel like the film community is used to pretty extreme challenges. Granted, we're not frontline healthcare workers or digging ditches and all that stuff. I mean, but we do have we've got a lot of challenges in making films. Weather and hours, and not to mention being in situations where um, we're called upon to be, intimate in ways that kind of goes against, normalcy. So I'm pretty confident that as a film community, we'll be able to do it. What I do think is going to be really necessary is to, keep a good check on how people are feeling emotionally about, you know, going to work dressed in essentially PPE, and how actors feel about being the person without the PPE on, without the mask. Because I think that could take its toll. Not to mention, everyone's head is in a in a very challenging point in life, and even any kind of gig, going back to work is going to be difficult. uh the questions of, do you frame content as post COVID or pre COVID, is an interesting one. I not sure how. I think that's going to change project to project, and
Yeah, it's interesting because the movies and TV shows that we're seeing right now are a wonderful escape from what we're living through right now. And I'm not exactly sure how much I'm going to welcome our entertainment being infused with it unless it's really, really good. You know, if we get a whole
I
bunch of
agree.
stories about COVID, it had better be really well made.
I agree. I agree.
And there was this one thing that I had read a while back about different plans for virtual production where actors might get like mailed their costumes and perform scenes in front of a green screen. Has anything crazy like that come your way?
Not yet. No, nothing has come my way in terms of that. I have, talked about, we there's been discussions about certain projects. They're starting to um, toy around. I think in music, I've kind of heard about this with automated camera situations where someone would come in and load in cameras that could make moves and then be able to not be on set to automate them. Um, but the costumes being mailed. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, good luck if that winds up being a part of your immediate future.
Sure.
All right, let's move over to some students, and I want to just announce this to everyone out there. What we like to do, if you haven't been on one of our webinars yet, is to invite you over to be a panelist just temporarily, and then we'll ask if you feel comfortable turning on your camera. It would be great to see your face as you ask the question, but if not, you can just turn on your mic and ask it. So it does take just a second to switch people over. And we'll start with a current USC student, Dia Mehta. And I just need to find you real quick in here. So Dia, I'm gonna move you over.
Hi.
Hi, Dia.
Thank you so much for your time. I just wanted to ask, you've worn like a lot of different hats and worked with a lot of different genres. Have you experienced like any industry pressure to stick to one genre or role? Or if so, how did you overcome this?
Yeah, this is what I think in general about being an actor. And it doesn't really so much apply. It probably does apply to filmmakers to a certain extent. Actually, it does. If you do one thing that does well and people like it, or it makes money, that's really the bottom line, right? Everybody's going to want you to do that again. You're in a scary movie, it does a lot of box office. Everyone's going to be throwing scary movies at you. You play a bad guy, they want you to play a bad guy. So in order to kind of push back against that, I just have tried my best to look for characters that are not exactly the same as the person that I just played, because that's just not that interesting to me, and it's hard because in some ways Hollywood does not have much of an imagination, and even when it comes to directors or writers. Well, he's a comedy guy, he's a comedy guy. We're not going to have him do that. That doesn't make any sense. So if you want to bounce around, as I always wanted to, you have to make a really strong decision that you're going to try to shape things, as opposed to letting our industry shape you, because people will put you just in a box.
Okay, let's bring on an incoming freshman student, Claire Franklin. Claire, let me just quickly move you over.
Hi. Oh my God. Wow. Hi.
Hi.
So I have many questions written down, but I'll just give you one. What are the things you look for in roles and characters, and the ones that are presented to you? What is your process and steps you take in creating and embodying that character so that it is complex yet realistic to humans and, you know, making it as just realistic as possible?
Well, when it comes to roles and characters, I'll tell you what I don't think about. The things I don't think about are the size of the part, the size of my paycheck, or the size of the budget of the film. Because once you think about those three things, then that really shrinks what you're going to be able to do. And I became an actor not because I thought that Kevin was interesting, because Kevin is really truly not. I became an actor because I wanted to walk in interesting people's shoes and put that across. And I wanted those men that I was going to try to embody to be as different as possible from each other. And the actors that I admired, you know, like Dustin Hoffman and Meryl Streep and Gene Hackman, Al Pacino, whatever that I was looking at, you know, on the screens when I was a young man. That was the thing that they were doing, was they were giving us these different looks at the human condition. So if I look at a role, I say to myself, first I look at, you know, I probably should think more about, will the movie be a hit, or will you know, is it going to get an Oscar or whatever? But really what I think about is this you know, is this something new for me that's going to like inspire me or make me have to learn something or go someplace or try to think about a different like walk of life. And in terms of my process, you know, it shifts, it changes over the course of time. But you know, I do a lot of research, and I do a lot of thinking about the backstory of the character. And to the extent that there's any kind of people that I can engage with who are real people that, you know, have a life or do this kind of job or whatever it is, you know, that's kind of the ride along, you know, concept. I'll do that. And then I just start, you know, learning the lines and doing all the exterior stuff. You know, you like, you know, dialect and clothes and body and hair and makeup and walk and talk and, you know, and then hope it all comes together into somebody that you believe the humanity, as you very aptly put it. You know, you want that character to feel like a human being.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, let's go. We're gonna go to USC alumna Emily G. And just while I'm doing that, Kevin, I'm curious if there's any performance or film of yours that you really wish more people had seen, that we can steer all of these young filmmakers over to watch.
Let's see. Off the top of my head, I'd say about 85% of them. Well, I'd say, well, you know, there's a film, there's a real small film. It was a real cool movie called Cop Car that I did a few years ago, and it was made for a shoestring budget. And I think filmmakers, it's a good one to see because it shows how with a very, very little amount of money, you can make something really exciting and really fun and really character driven and also kind of cool and scary. And the filmmaker is a guy named John Watts, who, you know, we made Cop Car in his hometown and his for nothing. I mean, I don't want to say what it cost, but it was nothing. And his family was out there, you know, and they were carrying gear around and stuff like that. And, you know, nobody really saw the movie except for the people that were deciding who was going to direct the next Spider-Man. And he got that gig. So if nothing else, as a kind of inspirational story about what can happen if you make a cool little movie, it's definitely worth seeing.
I double that endorsement. Cop Car was fantastic. We have Emily on here too, so let's
Hi, Emily.
take it away, Emily.
Hi, it's great to be able to ask you a question. I was just curious, in terms of takeaways, what do you hope are some of the biggest takeaways that viewers experience upon seeing this film?
Well, I think that, you have a man who is married to a woman who is way too young for him, and he's so paranoid about that, and is also dealing with a lot of dark kind of things in his past that he has not really been able to truly confront. And yet, these two people seem to be in their own way kind of right for each other. And he really desperately loves this little girl, even though he's getting on and not really able to maybe get down and play toys with her as much as he should. You know, it's a movie that has to deal with, the sins of the past. And at what point do you find redemption, or do you never find redemption based on what you've done? And does honesty and owning up to the mistakes that you've made get you to a place of peace or not? And those are very big philosophical questions. But the truth of the matter is that if you turn off the lights and you wait till it's dark and you watch the movie, I just hope you get scared. I just want you to get scared. That's what you want with a horror movie. In the same way you want people to laugh if it's a comedy, or cry if it's a drama. So
Great, thank you.
thank you.
Okay, I want to call on a current student, David Wilner. Get you over to the panelists. All right, David, are you with us? Okay, just make sure I mute yourself.
Hi, Kevin.
Hi.
I was just wondering, as an actor, what kind of characteristics do you like in a director? Like, what are some characteristics that's directors that you've enjoyed working with?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I love to put myself in the hands of directors, but pretty early on, I learned that a director is not an acting teacher. I think sometimes as actors, we make the mistake of thinking that that's what we're going to get. And I think sometimes as directors, we make the mistake of thinking that that's what we need to be. A lot of directors are really afraid of that moment where they've got to go, the actor's not doing what it is that their vision was, and they've got to come up with the thing that they're going to say that's going to push their performance into the stratosphere. So I've worked with people that screamed all day long. I've worked with people that never gave me a single piece of direction, not specific to me. I mean, they would say, stand over here or whatever. And what I've learned to do is, my point of view as an actor is to try to do my homework, do as much homework as I can, have a really good understanding of who this man is, and then come on the set, and I want to just have a chance to do my thing before somebody comes in to give me suggestions. Like I always say to myself, and I'll tell this to a director, I'll give it to you, man. And if you don't like it, then we can talk about it. But I'm going to bring something for you to see. On the directing side of things, what I've tried to do is, and again, everyone's got a different way of working. I try to create a world where everybody is feeling the most supported and be able to do their best work. I don't think of a director as a critic. We're going to have plenty of critics once the movie opens, you know. I think of a director as a support system, you know, someone that can say to the actors or the cameraman or the operator or the production designer, that's good. Can we make that a little better, or can we kind of go a little bit more in this direction, or come up to the actor and say, that's you're doing great, let me see what else you got, you know, like something that's going to encourage people, because people want to do their best, you know. So I also, at this point in my life and my career, I mean, I have to say that and this doesn't really apply necessarily to everybody, but I do feel like I want a collaborator to a certain extent. You know, I want somebody that has the respect to say that, based on the amount of films that I've done and the amount of time I've spent on a set, that what I have to offer is of some value.
Thank you.
Okay, I want to bring, we'll maybe do a couple more. We've got Professor Amy Reed from our faculty. Let me move her over.
There we go. Hi, I'm the sound nerd here. Sound tends to play a big role in horror films, and I'm wondering if you're ever responding to sounds that are played back on set that have been pre-sound designed, or if it's someone snapping their finger, or if there's nothing and you guys are just really immersed in your role.
I have never even considered the idea of pre-sound designing. It's a fascinating idea. No one has ever done it on a set that I've been on for any kind of movie, whether a horror movie or not. I have been played music if there's no dialogue, and you know, to kind of mood music, and sometimes it's played by a director and then dropped out once the dialogue started, or whatever. I worked with John Hughes back in the 80s, I guess it was, and he used to love to play music all the time. But never sound design. And in fact, people have asked me, you know, so is it scary on the set of a horror movie? It's really not scary, because you're going down a hall, but there's like 30 people, you know, they're following you, and you're coming around a corner and there's a guy standing right there with a light, and you know what I mean? So it really is I don't even know if a pre-sound design would even be helpful, but maybe.
Thank you.
It's a cool idea. It's a cool idea. Maybe I'll try it someday.
Okay, let's go out to an incoming transfer student, Nan Lee.
Hello. This
Hi.
is awesome. Cool. So I'm watching this with my girlfriend. We're both huge fans. I think.
We're just seeing
But
it.
she didn't trust me. I'm not just FaceTiming a ghost or something. So my question is, for, hey Kevin. So my question is, you know, when you're looking in the mirror sometimes, like, what character like flashes back and you're like, oh yes, I'm him, or like he's me? Like, do you ever have those moments when you're like thinking, like right out of the shower or something, or getting ready, and you look in the mirror and you're like, suddenly you're back to where you play that role or something?
Nah, you know, it's funny, because first off, my whole idea about acting is you use yourself and you lose yourself. And by that, I mean that I have to use my experience, and I have to use, to a certain extent, the way I look, except for whatever can be tweaked and changed. I have to use the emotional things that I felt. my voice is my instrument, and my body, and so I'm using myself. But when I am, the time between action and cut, I want to feel like I've lost myself. I want to feel, I don't want to feel like Kevin. I want Kevin to be gone. And when I finish a film, I really do say goodbye to those characters. They don't really stay with me. They stay with me while I'm making it, big time. You know what I mean? They permeate my thoughts. They permeate my dreams, my daydreams, my meditations. I'm definitely thinking about them. But when they say cut and wrap on the last day, I'm like, see you, pal. You know, maybe, hopefully we won't have reshoots when we have to meet again. So if I look in the mirror, I can honestly say I've never seen a character.
That's really interesting. How long have you had that type of like relationship with your with acting or with your characters? Have you developed this in the beginning, or has it been?
No, I think I've always felt that way. I've always felt that way. So I don't really, actors say this and everyone rolls their eyes, but I look at my movies a lot when I'm making them. I look at dailies, I look at my performance, I'll see as many cuts as the director wants to show me. I'll look at test screenings. I will go to the premiere and watch it again with an audience because I want to see an audience. And once it's gone, once it's done, I don't know that I've ever watched one of my movies in full. Maybe one, I don't know. I've seen snippets here and there, but I just don't go back.
Thank you. That was really awesome. Thank you.
Thank you, man.
All right, so I have one last one from Kayla Cummings. Let me move her over. And I'm sorry that we're not going to get to everyone's questions, but I think we got through quite a nice number of them. All right, Kayla. Oh, well, Kayla, this is your shot. Let me unmute you and see if that works.
Hi, Kayla.
Hi.
There we go.
There you are.
So my question is, was your process when you're first given a new script?
Well, I read it, and then I read it, and then I read it again. And then I start to think about the backstory of who this man is. And I start to answer as many questions as I can about him, even if I don't think they're ever going to be in the movie. Things like, what's his favorite food? What were his parents like? Where did his grandparents come from? I'll even make a playlist of songs that character might like. And I'll listen to that playlist, and the songs are never going to be in the movie, but they're just things that I need to figure out for myself. And then I start to look at the scenes, and sometimes I get them like right away. Like sometimes the voice comes to me, the who it is, and sometimes you have to kind of reach for it a little bit. Of course, there's if there's research to be done, if you're playing an architect and you have a scene where you want to be believable, as you can do architecture research. It's a period piece, you can look into that period. If you're playing a cop, you can try to find cops to ride along with. So it's all that stuff. And then eventually, once I've figured out a lot of this kind of internal stuff, I start thinking about, okay, how do I want to look? Do I start to see what the clothes might be? Do I start to see what the hair is going to be, what the makeup's going to be? How are we all as a team going to be able to build this? And I'll start talking to the costume people and start talking to the hair and makeup people and dialect coach or whatever. And hopefully it all comes together and becomes someone that, is interesting to watch.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So, Kevin, I just got a note from Barnett Kelman. He wanted me to say hi.
Yeah, that's great.
Part of our faculty, one of the shining stars of the SCA faculty, particularly initiating a program that we have here on USC comedy.
Oh, cool.
Which has really been transformative here.
Awesome.
So thank you so much for doing this. I urge everyone, I put the link to the movie's website down in the chat. If anyone hasn't seen the movie, definitely go and rent it. It's now available. I used Amazon, but I'm assuming it's available on a variety of platforms.
Yeah, you can get it.
And I look forward to seeing what you do next.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
And if it winds up being a costume in the mail and a green screen, I'll enjoy that too.
Yeah, we'll see.
Thank you so much. Take
All
care.
right, thanks everybody. Peace.
Good night, everyone.